Hello everyone, my name is Edward. Today I'll be showing you the basics of Inkarnate.com. This is my personal favorite mapmaking service to use, but it can be a bit confusing. Firstly, I'll be using the premium version of Inkarnate, which allows me to use a wide variety of stamps and features. I'll be publishing these maps under my profile, Botanist Edward. And finally, I'll be using the standard Fantasy Battle Maps 2.0 and Medium 2K Landscape. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and walk through all of these different options here. You can edit your map details, which allows you to write a name for your map, which is needed for saving. You can save the map, of course, save it as a clone, which allows you to make a copy and start editing the copy. You can make your map a little bit bigger or smaller, you can download it. You can download the map as a specific file if you would like to, for whatever reason. If you ever have any bugs that may happen while you're making, you can go into their recovery options. If you ever upload any private assets, you can take those out, and you can look at what's new on their website, frequently asked questions, or get help. This is your exit button here. With those out of the way, we can move on to the sidebar. This mouse allows you to move tokens. The shovel here allows you to place down land that differentiates between the foreground and the background. If you don't care about having either of those, then you can leave it, you can completely skip the step. But here, it allows you to put land down in different shapes. You can fill things in, you can put them in specific shapes that you want to. There's a lot of different options here, as well as the advanced settings here that allows you to mess with almost anything you could think of. You can mess with the width of the strokes, you can make them as thick or as thin as you would like. You can mess with the specific outline of the shapes. You can make it brighter or darker. You can mess with the shadows, which I won't because it scares me. You can change the specific coloring of the ripples, and I'll zoom in here for you to show you. If you want to get really in depth with it, you can change this to whatever you like. Otherwise, you can change the width, count, and gap of those ripples that were coming out of the land there too, and you can watch them change here in real time. The paint icon allows you to paint your background and foreground respectively. You can paint on the background and it won't cross into your foreground areas. You can paint in the foreground and it won't pass over into your background areas. Or if you want to go over both, you select top there and it'll cover everything possible. Of course, there's a massive catalog that we have. You can use whatever you like. There is a large swath of these that you can use, and it feels like they're updated pretty frequently. Again, you can change the size, the opacity, just make that maybe a little bit brighter so that you can see it, or the softness of it, which I don't do a great job of showing right here, but you can see the difference of little softness versus full softness, just the difference in those two. And of course, if you don't like it, you can erase or Control Z. They're very good about that sort of thing. For the stamps here, almost anything you can think of. They default to trees, which is nice because you're almost always going to be using trees. You can change the size, again the opacity, the rotation. You can select which layer you'd like it to be on, and you can see over there on the right that those three trees are on layer 1. I'll put this on layer 2, and it now dwarfs that other tree, which you can see is underneath it. There's a lot more options, which allow you to flip horizontally or vertically almost any token you could need. You can change the blend mode to almost anything you can think of. You can blur them if you want to give the effect of viewing them from farther away. You can change the amount of them. I'm going over them here, you can see on screen. If you want a lot of singular tokens, all one right after the other. For auto select, you can see that you can choose to grab or not grab tokens that you have just recently placed down. When I go back to select, it allows me to grab all of these blurred trees and I can do whatever I want with them. I can change the hue, the saturation, the brightness, the contrast. I can make these trees look however I want. I've definitely used these to make the trees pink or purplish to give them the effect of being fey before they added their fey tokens. And of course I can modify the width and height of the tokens as well. Text, pretty easy. This allows you to label anything that you might need. If you want to, say for instance in a regional map, label a shop, text option would be a great way to do that. Shops, armors, smitheries, castles, points of interest, oceans, the names of cities themselves, just to name a few things that the text would be useful for. I've got a lot of different options for the text too, as you can see in the background here while I ramble. You can change the rotation, again the opacity, the color of it, if you want it to have a drop shadow, which layer it's on, if you want to maybe give it the effect of there's so much in here that you can't really quite see the names of the cities. A pathing tool, again great for regional if you want to make man-made paths. I don't really use this tool outside of regional maps, but they do have different styles for the path, so that is nice. You can add notes to yourself. I don't really do this, only because I need to go back into this note tab to see where my notes are, but it can be useful if you're a bit scatterbrained and have a good idea and want to write it down for later. You can enable the grid if you want to make sure that tokens you place down are setting up correctly, or at least being in line. A lot of different options here again. The columns, the rows, you can change the offset, the color of the lines. I'll make it a little bit different colored here so that you can see it. Again, the width, the opacity, and the layer. They really let you have a lot of freedom with the maps that you make here. Finally, filters. These are great. My personal favorites are overcast, winter, night, red sky, and rain. You're going to be seeing a lot of those in the maps that I make because they're really fun and they're really great. And you can see here that you can change the opacity and it'll add the effect of raindrops onto the map. You're going to want that layered up probably about 4 or 5, probably 4 if you want to put light effects over it. For instance, on a night map and you want to make a torch actually produce light. I'm not going to do that because warnings scare me, but I will take a second here, get rid of all this stuff, and we'll make a proper map. Alright, now that we have all of that out of the way, let's make a map. My typical process breaks down to look like deciding what type of map I'm making, placing the land, placing the tokens, adding a filter if necessary, naming it, saving it, and exporting it to Roll20. Firstly, I'll be putting land down for the whole map, except for a small section there in the southwest. For this map, we'll be making a forest with a cave. A lot of trees are going to go down first to give the map some borders to work with. I like to give my players defined paths and entrances and exits, be them made by trees or with dirt or otherwise. I just feel like it helps to eliminate the daunting feeling of exploration, especially in these forest maps, but that's just me. With these trees down for the most part, we're going to start adding a couple fluff ones in the center here to give it a little bit of life and to make it look less barren. And then we're going to open our catalog here and we're going to tackle that southwestern pond. What I like to do sometimes is scroll all the way down and see any other tokens that I might want to use on my way to the ones I'm looking for. In this case, we're going to be heading all the way down to the water pack here. We'll grab some fish and let's put about 10 of them in the background area where there's no land. Make sure that they're sized appropriately. A good rule of thumb is to size human-sized tokens down to about 70, 75. When I say human-sized, I mean that humanoid characters would be able to interact with these items and have them not dwarf them, so to speak. You wouldn't want a couple of regular fish being size 100, 120, when your players that are on the map are only going to be maybe size 60 or 70 at best. We'll put down a couple lake fronds as well, and a couple lilipads. And back into the catalog here, we're going to search for some small rocks. we want to give a little bit of life to the bottom of the pond as well. Size them down a little bit, make sure that those are also underneath everything else, and then get to placing. Again, you want the pond to look like it has enough life for people to be interested in it, but not so much that it's overbearing. With all of your rocks placed, go ahead and grab all of these tokens, minus the tree and the lily pads, and you're going to flatten them all to the background. This allows us to open up paint, go into the water section here. I'll go ahead and just use the standard water paint that they give us. Make sure you're on background, drop the opacity, and you're going to go over this pond a couple of times with this water. The goal is to make it difficult to see, so much so that the players believe that they actually could be underwater, but not so much so that they can't see the damn things. Depending on your opacity, you may have to go over it 3 or 4 times. I go over it 3 here at 0.4, but I think it looks pretty acceptable as far as a pond goes. With that out of the way, we'll go ahead and add just a small turtle, just for funsies. Again, make sure you're on the right token layer so that you don't accidentally place it underneath the lily pad. And there's our pond, all completed. You could add a couple of rocks or boulders or anything like that, but I think that's okay for right now. Also go ahead and back up into the trees here and plug a couple of the gaps that I left. I don't want the players assuming that they can travel anywhere else besides the cave that we'll put down in just a little bit here. Before that, let's go ahead and add some forest floor plants. I like to add these ones that are specifically called forest floor plants, and I like to place them around at random. Any other things that you may see in a forest would be good too. Small rocks, animal droppings, different animals, flowers, mushrooms, fallen trees, stumps, an abandoned campsite, things like that. Now, let's move on to the main attraction of this map, the cave. You're going to want to make sure it's on the correct layer, of course, and then place it right underneath those trees. I'll put it in the northwest corner here. This token is definitely one of my favorite cave tokens to use. I feel it's much easier to use than making your own with boulders and shadows. It allows it to be placed anywhere, it looks great. Definitely one of the better tokens to use. Another trick that I like to use is to get the paint, make it the stone wall color. Again, make sure it's on the right layer and size it down, and paint underneath the cave with it. I have my opacity turned down a little too low for it to matter, but once I up it here, you'll be able to see a little bit better that the rocks on the cave look a bit more full, as opposed to being able to see some of the grass underneath it. It's completely extra, and it's only for those who are very detail oriented and hyper focused on seeing those things. But I'm one of those people. You can also put down some dirt underneath the gap. You could also put some dirt at the mouth of the cave to give it a bit more of a realistic look. Once we go inside the cave, we'll have a lot more dirt and stone, but we'll save that for next week. Alright, and with that, our forest cave is pretty much done. Of course, save it and name it so that nothing crazy happens. But the last thing that I like to do before I officially finish a map is to just scroll through the catalog and see what other tokens would be kind of fun to place down. In this instance, I am going to open the catalog here, scroll down just a hair, and get the idea to put an abandoned campsite down once I see the campfire token in the core pack here. Sometimes what you search for doesn't pull up, so feel free to refine your search to be a little bit more basic. You can also include tags of the items themselves. Specifically, if you want broken and dilapidated items, all you need to search for in the catalog is broken, and it'll bring up every token that has that tag with it. For this, let's add an abandoned campsite. Why not? Maybe an old hermit lives here, or still does. We'll put down the tent, we'll put down a campfire, make sure to put some dirt underneath the campfire to give it the allure or the sense of having been burnt or used. And then we'll also put down a couple of cut down stumps here. Maybe whoever was living here had to cut them down himself, maybe nature did it, we'll never know, or maybe we will. I also would like to give this abandoned campsite a broken tool of some sort, just to give the feeling of the fact that someone really was roughing it out here. I think a broken fishing rod is perfect, especially given how we have a pond just right across the way. There are no broken backpacks to use, unfortunately, but just instead use the other millions of tokens that they've lovingly handcrafted for you. Me, I'm gonna go ahead and use one of these broken statues. I love broken statues. Probably one of my favorite random events to use when I'm DMing or even just map making. Who built this thing? Why? Who is it in reverence to? Was it made by a group of people? Was it made by a crazy madman? We don't know. And just to give it that extra feeling of someone's here, we'll scale down one of these Titan swords and we'll put it in the stump. Maybe we can make it a bit chipped or rusted, or you could have this be a perfect two-handed broadsword, whatever you like. Our map is done. Congratulations. The last step, and I promise, is to simply add a filter. Forest lighting is amazing. This just completes the map, I feel. I don't have to do anything else to it, except for add a couple more boulders, which I am now realizing I forgot to add. Save it up one last time. We'll go ahead and publish it. And that's that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. And I hope that this gave you some ideas or some help on using Inkarnate. Next week, we'll make a couple maps in that cave. And for now, you are more than welcome to install, download, use this map. Regardless, thank you very much for coming.